There we go.
Hey, hey, hey,
Hey, hey.
we're live.
We are indeed.
Joey and I have been having a conversation about when life coaches fail. What an interesting topic, I
Yeah,
was thinking. You know, life coaches are meant to have their act together, aren't they, Joey?
apparently so.
Yeah. And and obviously, when you sit with a client, you're so focused on how that client can succeed that you're either going to succeed in helping them succeed or you're not.
Mm.
And I know there's a lot of in between in that where they get some improvement or they get some breakthrough. But from my experience, there are times when I simply don't succeed helping a client. And I wanted to talk about that. I wanted to explore and get your get your take on your own experiences, how you've been getting excited about helping people,
Yeah.
what's going on there,
Yeah, I mean, the life coaching side of coaching is it's a new transition for me.
Mm.
Obviously coming from a health coaching background.
Hi, Earl.
But it's definitely I think not just life coaches in general. I think coaches across the board. You
Mm.
know the transference about what we were talking off air,
Mm.
um, about how it can move across is it's prevalent in most coaching industries about how failure is a thing as well.
Yeah. And look, and the reason why this topic is important to discuss is because when you are trusted as a coach to help someone get clarity
Mm.
and and connect to strategies or ways of thinking that can give someone a breakthrough, it's not that simple because we can easily underestimate how a brain has been wired subconsciously with trauma. Now, trauma is a big dimension of what makes it hard for a life coach who wants to help someone succeed. Someone comes along and says, "I've got goals and I'm not realizing them."
Mm.
And the reason why is it's not always as simple as, oh, there's knowledge, there's
Yeah.
how to, thanks for the how to, off I go. It's often resistance,
Yeah.
and that's based on self doubt and fear. And then as soon as you go to understand that, you head into um, what conditioned the person into fearing, doubting their worth, fearing their capability, and feeling disconnected from their environment or fearing their environment.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then that gets into then you've got psychology and counseling that are trying to help people heal from those traumas. But a lot of people experience traumas that go unaddressed. And you know what, Joey? I don't think I've met anyone who hasn't been raised in trauma,
Yeah. I
which
think.
is an interesting
Yeah.
thing because what is trauma? Trauma is when you're shocked because what you believed about yourself and the world suddenly that's challenged and the brain has to recalibrate and wire assumptions that you're not that worthy, you're not that capable, and the world is a lot uglier and not as beautiful as your heart felt it should be.
Yeah.
Yeah, and 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 I also noticed that trauma can happen later in life, not just the early years, through accidents and horrible abuse and you know all that kind of everyday challenge of where things can get really bad. And what we end up doing is we we end up having a view of the world that we experience as reality.
Hmm.
And the brain has that ability to give you a world that you see and feel about that shapes your relationship in it. So then when a life coach comes along and you've got goals, there's a whole world in that brain that's wired that's not easy to see.
Yeah.
And a life coach can easily fail when they're trying to reach out to someone and the person doesn't know why they're stuck.
No.
And is almost afraid to look, which means they're holding themselves disconnected from the reasons,
Yeah.
which is going to make it impossible for you to go there. So I guess the reason why I like this topic is because why don't we get real and appreciate that a life coach has a important role, but it does come with genuine limitations.
Yeah.
And one of those limitations is the fear and doubt of finding your identity outside of your traumas and those assumptions that have been wired in the brain that say you should have arrived already, you should have been good enough. Yeah?
Yeah. I guess it's it's from a client perspective is, when you want to reach out to someone, you obviously you want to search for an answer, but it's that having that the humility to be willing to look for the answer rather than expect it. And it's in the coaching world, not just the life coaching world, like in the health industry, for example. I've seen it with a few of my clients where they've come and expected a result, and they've not been willing to look deeper at what really needs to be done in terms of training and things like that, and looking at other aspects that might need to be worked on, and looking at the real root cause. They just think it's like okay, I've hired a coach now, then that's the answer. I'm automatically, now I've got a coach, I have a result. Whereas it's the whole process that needs to be followed in terms of, it doesn't have to be the same for every single client, or it doesn't have to be the same for every single coach. It's just that there has to be a certain process that needs to be followed, and both the life coach or any coach and client have to go on that journey together. If only one goes on, then it's you're always going to come to a road where the belief system will take things to a grinding halt.
When I failed as a life coach for a client, the most frustrating part of that is that they agree with you. In other words, you get them to a point where what they believe, you've deconstructed it far enough for them to see the nonsense, right? And they agree with you. And that is not the way to be. But they can't let it go.
Yeah.
And then they get frustrated and angry with themselves because they can't let it go, because they're now too aware. You can argue that that's a bit of progress, because at least they're one step closer to knowing what the issues are. But it's amazing how the brain can just make you move on and disconnect from that awareness and let that same crazy belief system control you again. Yeah. It's amazing. And we're all grappling with that terrible issue. It's like a tug of war where, you're tugging for truth, and the brain's tugging for the lies that it feels the truth, which makes it overprotective or underprotective, reckless.
Yeah.
And it's quite frustrating when you've got a client who comes to you session after session, and you know what they say? You're not going to be impressed with me. It's like they turn it into this religious confessional, Yeah. You're not going to be impressed with me. I know. Like, in other words, they know. Like, and what happens as a coach is that you're put into a situation where you're thinking, how do I break this pattern where the person is holding themselves at arm's length and inadvertently you as well, because now you've both agreed what the truth is, but the subconscious is winning, and neither of you know how to shake that loose.
Yeah.
Now, of course, there are processes for that, but you know what I find amazing? They don't follow the process, even though it's actually within their fingertips to follow. They don't. And that resistance, that I'm a big believer that you got to honor the resistance.
Yeah.
You know? So it's like, okay, fine. Whatever is going on that makes you not want to, like, follow a step that's tangible, let's go there.
Yeah, it's funny. I think it's when it comes to dealing with things like life coaching and the sort of things that come up. It's the sort of, when you look at it metaphorically and how to put that across to people, it's a lot more difficult to translate because people's issues and the reason people come to see life coaches are vastly different. Whereas metaphorically, like turning it across to in the background that I've come from, for example, a big one that screams to me with there is diet and nutrition, for example. So people come for a trainer, to a nutritionalist, looking for the answer. It's like, I want to lose X amount of kilos. I want to feel better about my body. Okay, give me what I need to go. And you go, okay, so you talk about the nutrition, you talk about the food, you talk about what they've eaten, how they relate to things that they've eaten. And then you give them this magical nutrition plan, which is, if you find the right nutritionalist.
You heard it first here. It's magical. Now, and I know what you mean by magical. Yeah. As in, it's science-based, it works consistently, and it's a very doable, tangible plan.
Exactly, yeah. And with like life coaching, especially like EP7, having been through it myself, so the things in there are very tangible and very logical in terms of helping resolve problems. But making it nice and simple with the food, for example, you have this plan that's been designed to help not just yourself but many other people as well. Obviously you have to tweak things here and there depending on situations, for example. But then, like you said, next week someone will come along and go, okay, let's jump on the scales, see how well you've done, for example. And it's like, oh, you're not going to be impressed with me, I had a KFC for lunch, I had this for dinner, I went to McDonald's, and
isn't that like saying, oh, look, I know that I'm here to, learn about, if they're religious. So this is a funny religion. I know you're helping me learn about God, but I'm sorry, but on my way here, I pashed the devil. I didn't mean to, but I'm sorry. Because KFC is, on the edge of pretty crazy when it comes to honouring your health and your diet.
Yeah, exactly.
It's very funny.
But
you're not making that up. Like they'll say something like that.
This will actually happen. Like, I've had, without going into naming names, I've had clients in the past that they will have gone through this process and will have analysed things and sat down and talked about nutrition, talked about training, talked about lifestyle and situations. And week in, week out, it's like, I did really, really well with my food this week, but on Monday I did this, and then Tuesday I did this, and Wednesday I had this, and it's like, well, you said you've done really, really well, but you've not been following the plan.
Yeah.
And it's a case of this just continually happens. And it's a point where, like you said before, you've handed this very tangible way of getting these results, but there's a resistance there in terms of wanting to follow the plan. Like it's a fight. It's not the plan that has the answer. It's a belief that you have the answer. As a coach,
visually, what you're describing to me is. And I think this is where we could understand why life coaches fail, right? Imagine the guy comes to you, or the girl, and they're in a version of being. Now, this version, when I give you this sphere, there's an ecosystem of assumptions that shapes the way they perceive themselves and everything. And they come to you because they're saying, my ecosystem is creating an obesity and a bad health for me that is not conducive to my thriving and to my enjoyment of life, right?
Sure.
So what happens is you look at the plan, you create a plan that says, here are the ideas that are going to help you no longer put up with the symptoms of what your ecosystem creates.
Yeah.
Right? The dilemma is that they're looking at their plan from their existing ecosystem. And I say that because it's an identity. So in other words, when you are fully immersed in a set of ideas, your life force entangles into them, and you're just feeling being an avatar like the Viking, right? Right? And so it's a very interesting thing, because I think coaches fail, and I fail, when I can't entice the person out of the identity of that way of being into that dynamic part of who they really are that can drop that self-fulfilling prophecy being, so that they can look at the plan, that plan that you give them, from a place where now they can actually move their identity into a world where that plan is just how they are. It's just how they live. It's just what gets prioritized, because that's just what's important. I think that crossover is so tricky that you don't know how to migrate them out of that ecosystem into a new ecosystem where they're not trying anymore, where the guilt and the self-resentment of knowing better but being stuck in that emotional gravity, right? How do we do it? And I talk a lot about innovate the invitation. Innovate the invitation. In other words, you're inviting them out and they don't come out. Yeah. So then you go, well, what is it how else can I talk to your heart? How else can I talk to your dreams? Yeah. How else can I talk to every part of you that exudes why you're here, that's been quashed by a myriad of assumptions that it has fogged and disconnected you from everything that matters, right? So as you invite, they stir. Yeah. And you know what? I love it when you're not failing and you create an invitation and their eyes do this. And they widen, because it's like something big, something truthful I have just connected to. And it's like you've just given them the oxygen to reclaim their life force out of the lie. Yeah. It's so beautiful. It's the aha moments, the euphoria, right? Yeah. And now, when it doesn't work and you innovate it, and it doesn't work and you innovate it, this is where I think you got to innovate as much as you can, but you don't know whether you, as a person who's trying, can do it. And it's almost like a battle between two individuals wanting the truth to set one free, but necessarily losing together because one person's stuck. Remember, I was explaining this before we went live. I was explaining it's like you're behind bars. Yeah. And it's like the coach is trying to say to you, those bars that feel cold and solid and real, and that when you press against them, you feel the pain? They're not real. Yeah. And for a person who hears that, they may want to believe you, and they may even understand the logic of why those bars are not real. Yeah. But emotionally, because of subconsciously projecting an expectation and a self-fulfilling prophecy that holds those bars in place, they're as real as it gets. Yeah. So it's very, and then really the innovation of the invitation, what it does is that it hones in on the individual bars.
Yeah.
And then it goes into the molecular structure of the bars. Because if you go in close, like the Matrix, the code, if you're going into the bars, it's coded with nonsense. And that's the truth setting you free part. Because you go, oh, that's an illusion. So the bar gets removed. But there are a few more bars left and you're still trapped. But at least you've undone one. And so it's always a work in progress trying to dissolve bar after bar in that mental prison.
Yeah.
To eventually that person realizes, you know what, I'm going to risk something. I'm going to risk that these bars aren't real. And I'm just going to step into freedom. And whatever consequences happen, I'm going to make the philosophy and the common sense of the plan. I'm going to make that my reality. And if I'm going to get whacked and hurt, and this is the point, right?
Yeah.
The subconscious is doing that to you. It's saying, don't go there. Don't go there. It's not going to work out. It's going to hurt you in some way. You can't predict it. And so if you take that risk and then suddenly you walk through the bars and you're fine, then suddenly you've glimpsed that freedom. And we know the Cinderella effect. You can fall back behind the friggin' bars that you've already experienced the nonsense.
Yeah.
And this is the frustrating part as well.
Yeah, it's true.
Like as a coach, you watch people glimpse the other side. And then they're living back in the version as if that other side was a fantasy, even though it was real.
Yeah.
And I think that's really important to kind of grasp and build resilience around that, so that you don't get too disillusioned.
It's true, and I mean, we can link that back to the nutritional side again. It's like, as a coach, I think one thing that I know I've missed in the past is to really understand what food is to people. Like, for example, a lot of people use food to help with mental issues, like falling behind bars. Like their bars include going to KFC, going to McDonald's, and that is having that junk food around is them being stuck behind the bars. That the food is the bars. So when you hand them this magical plan of what they're supposed to do, it seems easy in perspective because it's all mapped out scientifically. It can work. You've seen it work before, but it's about what these bars, which is in this case the food, for example, is actually representing to them. And yes, like going out and getting them to take that chance to move behind the bars and trying this nutrition plan, for example, is a way that they can feel the energy that they could have and feel that that this is working. This is how they can achieve what they want to achieve. But yes, like you said, with the Cinderella effect, it's if they come across something that pushes them back behind those bars, the food will always come back if they're willing to stay behind those bars. It took me a little while as a health coach to really understand that it's not just about the plan. It's what's behind the plan, what's going on outside of it.
And is there enough meaning that would make that plan so important to you that you literally wrap your energy around it so that it's part of your ecosystem? That's a process. That's why in EP7 we deconstruct the version, the ecosystem that is valueless, not giving you what you want. And then the whole opportunity here is to construct a version that's so richly representing what your heart yearns to be, that your life force gets sucked into it willingly, because finally it's that breath of fresh air of being something that makes sense and that you're finally going to break free, Yeah. Now, I was thinking earlier that it really is about asking the why questions. Like, why are you doing this? why is this that important to you? Why is this plan non-negotiable? And unfortunately, the subconscious has negotiables on it. You know, there's more conditions not to follow the plan than there is to follow the plan, which is why you're losing. You know, so I think the why question is a powerful way to untangle all the tentacles that are wrapping yourself away from the plan, especially if the plan is built on first principles that really do honor what your heart is all about. And I think that the bars, and this is something I was going to say earlier, but I didn't want to interrupt you.
Cool.
The bars get so familiar that it becomes your protection. So this is where you identify with yourself behind bars as a place where you're safe. And beyond the bars is a world that can hurt you. So staying behind the bars is actually comfortable, even though it's
it's
hurtful and conflicting for you.
Yeah, like putting it again, like food is a great example of this. It's like, and it's depicted in many, many movies, especially with breakups in relationships. You see an issue come around, like a girl's broken up with the boyfriend, for example, and the first thing they do is hit the big tub of ice cream. You know, it's the falling behind those bars. It's not necessarily the nutritional aspects. It's just that the relation to the comfort of the food, of the ice cream that it brings them. It's just, this horrible thing that's happened, or this small thing that's happened, whatever it may be. Yes, it's happened, but at least I can find solace in my tub of ice cream. It just makes me feel warm and cozy and comfortable for a minute.
You don't see a scene where there's a horrible breakup and the woman is so distraught. She goes and grabs raw carrots, cucumbers, and starts eating this raw food as she tears up with the break, and she eats the raw food, and then she goes for a run, and she goes, "Oh, I'm so upset. I feel like I need to honor my health and honor and make choices that finally are good for my health." What a weird scene that would be. Yet it would be the perfect way to finally get yourself into a better place. Instead, we have the sugar and the sugars.
Yeah, it's it's a perfect analogy of the bars, and I'm pretty sure 99% of people, unless you are extremely strict with your diet, will have gone to that place where something's happened during your day and you're feeling a little bit down in the dumps, a little bit crappy, and you reach for some sort of solace food, which is your bars, that sort of restrict you from moving to that next level when when you're looking for your health. And in terms of life coaching, it can be comparable to the situation that you're dealing with. You're so constructed into being a certain way and to doing things in a certain way that, yes, you have this plan of, and this beautiful way to be able to deconstruct and reconstruct, that it's so much easier to fall back than it is to go, no, I'm not going to let myself get drawn back into the bars that have been holding me back for so long. Which is, it's a great idea to really start to put in some sort of a distraction to focus you off falling it back into that cell. Like, I've said it to a few clients that have really struggled, especially with the nutrition, is, if you're having a bad time and you feel like you're going to go to McDonald's or hit the ice cream, just do push-ups until you literally cannot move. Like, you cannot lift yourself up off the floor anymore. And you've distracted yourself so much, I can almost guarantee you won't be thinking about food anymore. You'll just be thinking about how tired you are.
I wonder if you said to someone, you're allowed to have as much junk food as you want, but there is one condition that you must promise. You must do 200 push-ups before every meal, junk food meal. 200 push-ups. And you need to do it within an hour. Like, so you can't just, I wonder whether that is a physical barrier that changes the body's chemistry, which changes the mental attitude, because the moment you start to go back into that, it sends the signals that you're a can-do, happening person who's strong, who is on top of their world, and then suddenly the junk food doesn't gel. I mean, this is just me wondering whether that would be something that would work.
Well, like, if you think about it plain and simply without going too much into the psychology behind it, like, it literally is, if you just stop yourself and do some push-ups, I can guarantee that you'll be thinking about tiredness over food. Like, your body will switch away from your digestive system and go to the physical of just literally, it doesn't have to be push-ups, can be squats, can be a run, can be anything. But it's just that distraction from falling back into temptation that you will go, by the end of it, you'll go, whew, I don't feel as bad anymore.
Yeah. Those windows of cravings, no matter what those cravings are, they are still windows.
Yeah.
So in other words, cold turkey period, right?
Yeah.
And if you can just distract yourself, I think it comes down to there's a lot less discipline that needed. It's more about timely discipline. Just to tackle those moments when your body is controlling your actions in the wrong direction and your conscious brain is aware and it's going, oh, here we go, I can't help it, I need to have that, or I need to have this. It's those clever little techniques, circuit breakers, that can buy you time while you're trying to build that identity that doesn't even have the cravings anymore. You've completely adapted the body to that new way of being. And if you know that that's what you're moving towards, so it's not a forever fight of always cravings, always trying to do the right thing, winning often enough and being proud of the weight loss and the shaping of your body or the fitness or whatever, but then having to always fall back and, like, if you know that that's actually not the way it needs to be, because you will lose those cravings. It's just the way scientifically the body is. It will lose cravings if you have starved it long enough. The cold turkey's period is done. I know that there are traumas in the brain that associates those things as coping. So in other words, the brain says, oh, maybe you should go back there because we know we got a solution. But that craving that gets created is so easily manageable versus the body fully pushing you in that way. But I was going to also talk to you about times when a life coach can fail. You can get someone to a place where it gets so absurd that they're willing to believe that the laws of physics, the universe, or if they believe in God, that it gets to the point where they think they're an exception to the rule, the laws, the fabric of how the universe exists. And if you can get someone to that point, I think that's a pretty close place for them to laugh at the absurdity. And even then, it may not be enough. I have found that usually it is enough, but I also have seen individuals find other ways to get back behind the bars or get overconfident and reckless. In other words, if behind the bars was an issue, now they think that there are no cliffs and anyone with a negative opinion is the problem. And they actually turn on individuals and become, without realizing it, they become, I call it megalomania. There's megalomania going on,
Yeah.
So I find that it's a tricky business trying to get to that place where a person is so balanced and grounded with their head in the clouds in terms of possibilities, but their feet on the ground, respecting that we do live in a world with cliffs and bad attitudes and, sociopaths. Cliffs and sociopaths, man. They exist, right? Which means yes, you can inspire a sociopath not to be a sociopath, but the probabilities are still against you succeeding because that person's traumas are hard work, right?
Yeah.
But that doesn't mean you have to completely flush them down the toilet and demonize them. But you do have within your right not to be around them anymore for your own sake of well-being.
Yeah.
But I find that being able to have that balance and staying humble and confident in yourself, that's an interesting, beautiful combination. And it's tricky business. Because either someone's selling themselves down the river and not backing themselves, or they're selling everyone else down the river and they have to be the one that's right. And you know what? As a coach, I find that I fail when those two extremes are happening.
Yeah, I do see what you mean in that perspective. I mean, like on the opposite side to the megalomania, it's it's people can be conditioned so well to fear accountability, to think of it as authority, and it's like
Interesting point.
It's people will have this idea like, okay, I've got a coach now. They're going to help me stay accountable. So let's say that everybody slips up, everybody falls behind the bars every now and again, but that fear that accountability is your authority, and you literally have to lie to this person just to hide behind the guilt of what little slip up you may have done, holds you back from actually going through your goal. At the end of the day, it's the coach that you've hired is there to try and help you, hold you accountable, and not for them to be able to shout at you or have you praise. It's like the coach is there to help at the end of the day. But because this fear of authority, it gets challenged when you become accountable for something that's personal to you. You try to hide it, and the problem again, I guess, if you're not, as a life coach, if you can't see that or you miss that, then you'll be sat there thinking to yourself, it's like, well, they're telling me they're doing everything right. They're telling me they're following all the steps. They're telling me that the processes that they're doing to 100% to the T. But if you've not uncovered this fear, then your whole basis of your entire program could be squashed, because this person will not be opening up to you because of this fear of authority that's manifesting as accountability.
Look, every now and then I have clients who warn me that they need to be pushed and I need to hold them accountable. Now, that's all well and good because they have a track record where they're struggling. But that rings alarm bells for me. When they are warning me that I have to push them hard and hold them accountable, it's like, I'm not going to take ownership of the work we do between each other. You need to keep that ownership. And so that makes me realize I've got work to do in firstly achieving the goal of them wanting to own that accountability themselves. I'm happy to create an accountability environment, but I'm not going to be the champion of that accountability. The client has to be a champion of that. And I know that it's a bait. In other words, if you get, it might be a bit controversial here, but life coaches are humans, right?
Yeah.
Last time I checked. And if you have your own insecurities as a life coach that are expressing from needing to feel important and powerful, that you're making a difference in other people's lives, and you get baited by someone saying, I want you to make me accountable, that's like exciting for that coach who needs to feel powerful. It means like they've been given a ticket to have power, and they want the power. And it's a noble cause. It's like helping someone do the right thing by themselves and reach important goals. But it's still misguided. It doesn't work. And even if it did work, it's short-lived because you want lasting change, not a phase where someone's only doing it because you're pushing them hard and then they come out the other side and go, that was nice, but then all the issues that kept them from owning it resurface and then get them back on the same vicious cycle.
Yeah. Yeah, it's it can be a bit of an issue, you know, once you especially as a coach, if your ego gets baited, you know, and like you said, at the end of the day, we're all human. We all have our own things that we go through on a daily basis, and you know, just because a life coach is a life coach doesn't mean that you can't fall behind the bars every now and again. That you have to be always outside the bars. You know, it's as life coaches. You know, the reason I'm sat here with you today is because you know I need help sometimes too. And I guess it's having the understanding as well that, you know, to be humble enough to say, look, it's like the reason that I can't be that guy that's going to hold you accountable for everything is because it's not something that I have to do. It's something that we have to do to help you, or it's something that you have to do to make this partnership build together. Because at the end of the day, it's like we've created this metaphor of being behind the bars, and the alternative of that is to create this something else. But this something else isn't what I want as a coach. It's what they want as, you know, whatever they want to create. It's their story. It's their dream of how life wants to be, and they can create that in whatever picture they want to. But it's not for me to decide that as a coach, and to constantly have the knowing that is the way it is. And you have to be able to, as a coach as well, to not be drawn into, you know, I've got to be the one that solves this problem. I've got to be the one that pulls this person from the depths of, you know, this cell that you've created. That can get you trapped in that cell along with them. Yeah. Whereas you've got to literally be the shepherd, so to speak, to help guide them into this reality of whatever it is that they want to really create.
Yeah. And look, lastly, to finish up, I wanted to talk about, for some reason, when a client is struggling and I have to innovate, I like being creative. So I end up tuning in and finding funny ways to create the absurdity of the situation, of arguing for ideas that make no sense. Like, I like that world. It's actually quite, we laugh so hard together at the reasons why we're stagnant or pushing back on something that makes so much sense, you know? And so you enjoy it to the point where you often will break through and it's all good. But then sometimes when you don't, you're left deeply unsatisfied as a coach. And so as a message to all the coaches out there, don't let those experiences where you fail define you. Let them feed you. Sit with what that person was doing that was making them want to stay behind those bars or stay reckless. And just think and feel about, is there anything else you can do if you're put in that same situation again? That's not a bad thing to review, but at the same time, do yourself a favor and appreciate that as a coach, you're not changing people. You're holding an environment and facilitating ideas so that person changes themselves. Which means you're honoring their free will, and you're honoring that you are just being of service for where your influence begins and ends. And if you do that, you're going to have sustainability as a coach, because that's a very healthy way to be. If you start to encroach and feel like you're saving them, or that's actually quite disrespectful to them, and even to yourself and the profession. What you'll find is that you won't enjoy being a coach, because a lot of people are going to let you down. You see, that's a terrible shift for a coach to go into this scenario where the clients aren't doing enough. What's wrong with them? You're giving them. That's not the attitude. The attitude is, wow, I truly respect how fear and doubts and that mental prison can be so stubborn. And let your compassion for yourself in your endeavor to make a difference, and let your compassion for them, that it's not easy in a subconscious labyrinth with super glue trauma, gluing in these ideas and forcing them to stay rigid. And yes, you can loosen it. Yes, they're trying to loosen it, but they're still trapped. So you can only have love and compassion for someone, even though they're not following that common sense step-by-step path to set themselves free. And you don't know when what circumstance will jolt them out and they'll break through. So you've got to hold the space and hold the hope that their time will come when they're really ready, whether they come back to you or some other dynamic helps them. It doesn't matter. The point is you played the best role you could at the time.
Yeah, I think that's one thing that I really enjoy about being a part of the team at EP7 is the fact we are a team, we are a community. I mean, like within the coaching world, if you work solely by yourself and you have no community that you involve with that are on a similar path or a similar direction, you can kind of end up turning into a bit of a people pleaser.
Interesting. How do you see that? Like, how does a people pleasing thing happen?
Well, it's, you in whatever situation in the coaching world, people will come to you for help because of your knowledge of what you have based on your own situations or a certain system that you follow.
Yeah.
And if you don't share in an environment with somebody else, and all aspects of the coaching world is innovation. You're constantly trying to improve yourself to help improve others and help improve everything around you. If you just solely keep sticking to one thing, you tend to focus on this innate desire to want to solve this problem. And it's you feel like, I've got to solve this person's problem. I've got to do it. And because you've got this sort of lack of innovation, of continuing evolving, like creating an environment as a team is so important. The community is so important.
Absolutely.
to keep that humility there. Otherwise, you can just get trapped in, because you've no longer got your own environment to be innovative in. You're trapped in your own bars of your own little place, because that sharing, that connection that you're asking your client to have with you, you're not having with other people.
Do you know, if I look back on my life at all the breakthroughs I had, and my favorite ones, people were involved. People asked me questions. They ignited something in me, and it made me shift. Now I look back, now here's an exercise for anyone who's watching this. Think back on your life where you've had that breakthrough, a series of breakthroughs in your life, your favorite moments where you finally realized something and it changed you. Look at what was the environment you were in, what were the circumstances, and who were the people that either challenged you or put you into a situation where you had to think differently. And you will find that it's people connecting with people, being there for each other, is a very powerful thing. And that's why I look forward to our 7 coaches, me included, will turn into hundreds, and then eventually we'll have a global community where we're all being there for one another. That is a really important part of the foundation to get anywhere that's meaningful, is people being there for each other. So when a life coach is failing a situation, if you're in an environment where that client can stay immersed in a highly relevant, repetitious message that coach was trying to send to you in a phase, but then there's an environment that helps it keep going, that brain's going to eventually succumb, because that's just the way the brain learns.
Exactly.
So the power is in the people to synergize together as a community, and let's keep contributing to that.
Indeed.
Cool. Thank you, guys. We're going to sign off, and we'll look forward to the next one.
Indeed.
Bye for now.
See you soon.